Selling your home isn't hard, but living in it while it's for sale sure is. Let's talk about how to survive showings without losing your mind. On today's episode, we have Roger Grayson joining us. Roger is my primary partner and also soon to be realtor. Thanks for being here, Roger.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, today we're talking about how to survive showings without losing your mind. We're going to talk about how to keep your home market ready. And if you are enjoying this content, please be sure to like, follow, subscribe. You know what to do.
So, Kiki, tell me, what exactly does market ready actually mean?
I think a good way to describe it is, when you think about a home that's nicely staged and looks like it's ready for sale, it usually looks like it's in a magazine. And so, if you could just kind of get that picture in your mind, what does that look like? That's what you're shooting for. And we've got some episodes on staging too, so definitely check those out because staging your home appropriately makes it appeal to the most amount of buyers. And so keeping it that way, the same way that we had it when we took pictures, and the same way that we had it when the stager got done and it was clean, like that's the way that you really want it to look until really until you're under contract, but hopefully until pretty close to closing and you're moving out.
So, you're talking about like no dishes in the sink, no garbage overflowing in the kitchen, or um, beds not made, that type of thing? Just your basic.
Yeah, for sure. All the countertops should always be clear, aside from, maybe there's a few things that we leave on the countertop for staging purposes. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people, when they're living in their home, they are using counter space for storage space, and there's things that we just leave out on the counters all the time. And so you really want to just clear them off completely. And that means that if you've pre-packed, which we always recommend you do, because there's a lot of stuff you have that you probably don't need until you get into your next place. So pre-packing is a big deal. This means that you should have some cabinet space cleared out, or dresser drawers, or spaces in closets. You should have places cleaned out that you could easily, put things into a cabinet and get it off the counters, and this is not just kitchen counters, but bathroom counters too.
So, like, clean enough for to photograph well, but it doesn't have to be magazine perfect like every single showing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to stress yourself out about it being perfect for every showing. But the guidance here is that once we get it ready for pictures and showings, then I actually give people a checklist, like a daily, weekly, and monthly checklist of what they should be doing in their home to keep it that way. And so it's just this habit that you need to get into. Like, if you usually leave your bread on the counter, then, during your showing period, you should have pre-packed some of your dishes, extra dishes, and then maybe you have a spot in the cabinet that's where you now keep your bread until you leave and go to your next house. Because the biggest thing is once you decide to sell your house, it is not your house anymore. It's somebody else's. And so you sort of are living in it now like it's somebody else's.
So, you and I go to a lot of showings for your buyers. And we notice sometimes where you walk into a house and it is just pitch dark in there, or you go into the basement and you're searching for a light. How important is it to keep maybe some certain lights on, some shades open or closed, depending on the time of day? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is going to be different, if it's vacant. A vacant house is mostly going to have all the lights off. And when the buyer's agent brings the buyers in, they're going to be turning the lights on as they walk through and turning them off before they leave. But in this episode, we're really kind of focusing on sellers who are living in their home while the showings are going on. And so one of the things that you can do to help make your home the most attractive is to go around and open up all the blinds and turn on all the lights. You did bring up a good point earlier about trash and smells. Smells is a huge thing. And I get that, like, if you've just made dinner and now you need to gather up the family, get out of the house because there's a showing coming, it might still smell like dinner. I get it. Some stuff can't be helped. But if you are a person with pets and you, you know, that pet hair and pet smells, oh, those are can be overpowering. So as you get your house ready for the market, a good carpet shampoo also totally worth the money spent because people without pets, or even if they do have pets, when you walk in from the outside into the inside of a home, you should smell nothing. But too often, I'm afraid, people with pets, you do smell something. You smell that pet odor, or even with trash. And so if you're someone, I know you're so good about taking the trash out almost every day. When I live by myself, I don't necessarily do that, but trash can also start to smell and have a smell. So think about those things. Litter boxes, those things need to be scooped out every day. If that's not part of your regular, the way that you live with your animals, that's okay. But during showings, just know that you should be scooping out those litter boxes at least every day. And if you have more than one cat, you might need more than one litter box. Uh, with the dogs, buyers are going to go out in the backyard and walk around. The last thing that you want them to do is step in dog poo. Ew. So so that's another thing that, keeping it market ready is that you might be doing some of your regular routine cleaning stuff, like scooping the litter box or picking up dog poo in the yard. Like that needs to be done on more of a daily basis than what might be your usual schedule. So just kind of think about that and just tell yourself this is short term, and it's worth it. It's worth the investment of the extra time, the extra inconvenience to get that house under contract quickly for the most money.
So, Kiki, can you talk more about why showings feel so disruptive? We all realize that you want to leave the house and you have to, or you should, but what is it?
I just mentioned this idea about once you decide to sell your house, it's not your house anymore. And so going along with that, you're having strangers come into your house because you are still living there. It is still your house technically. But having a stranger who's the buyer's agent bring more strangers, the buyers, into your house to look around, I mean, that can be very disconcerting, uncomfortable, disruptive, all of that. So you kind of have to just mentally prepare yourself that that's what's about to be happening and that is going to serve your goal of selling the house. You just kind of have to deal with it. Um, but also this thing about it just feels like you're constantly cleaning, and it's just never ending because you're in this state of like feeling like it needs to be perfect and show ready all the time, which as a listing agent, yes, absolutely, I want my seller to feel that way. I want them to feel like it needs to be perfect for every showing because you never know which buyer is the buyer that's going to make an offer. So it can feel just like a lot. um, but that's where I come in and I try to help with having these processes and systems, I think help a lot. And so I have this checklist that says, okay, now once we've done pictures and we've staged and we put it on the market and it's perfectly ready, if you'll follow these guidelines of now these are the things that you do every morning, these are the things that you do every night, this is what you do once a week, and this is what you do once a month if it's on for that long, um, then I think putting a system to it can just help it be easier. Um, But, like, my daughter's house is up for sale right now. She's been trying to sell this condo because 'cause we're on HOAs. So we're trying to get her out of this HOA, and she's got a dog, and she's got a kid in school, and she's a single mom, and it's tough. It's tough when you get a showing request, and on the listing agent side, I want a buyer to be able to set a showing as late as 1 hour before they wanna get there, and I want them to be able to set that showing 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and so that means that a buyer could come at any time. Now we can make exceptions around that, right? Like if you've got something going on, you can't leave the house during this time, or like in the example of my daughter, if he's got like an 8 o'clock bedtime or whatever, she might need to say there's no showings after 7 p.m. And that's fine. But I also know that she missed a showing this week. The buyers were doing a schedule of showings, and that's very common. We pick out 4 or 6, we set them all up together, and we need to be there at that time if we're going to make that schedule. And so she was in the middle of a buyer showing schedule where they wanted to come at like 3 p.m. And that's a tough time for her because that's the time that, she's trying to pick him up from school. She didn't have enough time to be there to get the dog out of the house. So she had to decline that. And I'm sure her listing agent, she doesn't live in Denver Metro, which is why I'm not her agent. But I'm sure that her listing agent is just like, just so dying over the fact that that showing had to be declined, because the fact is, on the buy side, we're going to see these 4 or 6 showings in this time frame, and if the seller says, "I'm sorry, you can't come at that time," we're in a buyer's market. I may or may not go see that home again. We had one of those.
Mhm.
We were going to see 4. One of the sellers declined, and, then they wanna talk with us about, can we come the next day? And it was like, I don't know. We might come the next day, we might not. But since you're not gonna approve our showing, I guess you don't really wanna sell your house that bad, do you? Like, that's the feeling on the buyer end.
So, how about those folks who do work from home, which is that, very popular these days? What are your recommendations for folks who are home all day long and now they're getting showing requests in the afternoon? And what are your suggestions for them?
For remote work from home people, I would hope if you have a remote job that you have a little bit more flexibility and that you can, let your boss know that you're trying to sell your house, that you've got a showing, and that you're going to need some flexibility, and that, whether that means that you're taking an hour off during the day and maybe you're making it up in the evening, or if that means that you tell your boss, okay, look, I'm going to be out of pocket for 30 minutes because I got to pack up my stuff and go to a Starbucks or whatever for an hour. The showings, like I said, I mean, if you want to sell your house, you've got to let these people in, and you've got to let them in when they can get there. So, you can imagine the buyers have just as complicated schedules as the sellers do.
Yeah, I think sellers underestimate the toll it can take emotionally on you living on display and showing your home to strangers, like you said.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, picking up at the last minute, getting out, coming back. And then, like I said, people with pets, having to wrangle their pets. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
So, what systems can sellers put in place to make their home easier for them to show?
Oh, that's a good question. So I know we kind of talked about having like a cleaning schedule in place. So, in addition to that, I think another really good idea is this idea of having like bins or baskets that you can kind of like, if you're somebody who typically leaves some stuff out on your counter, maybe now that you've pre-packed and there's some extra space in a cabinet or a closet, maybe you have like a bin or a basket that you just go through and scoop stuff off into the bin, or like mail and things like that. Just throw it all in there, throw it into the cabinet, and then you can get out the door quickly. So that's one.
What about with pets and
Yeah, figuring out the pet situation, and that's gonna be different for everybody. Some people might have a neighbor that if that they could call and the neighbor could come grab the dog or the cat. Um, some people have animals that are used to being in crates, and, so crates are really nice for showings. It's not great if the pet is making a lot of noise. Usually, it's dogs. There's some dogs that in a crate, they'll just sit there and, like, you barely even notice that they're there. But then there's other dogs that as soon as somebody walks in and they know somebody's in the house, they're barking, barking, barking. So while the crate is a good option to have them contained during the showing, it's not such a great option if they're gonna bark the entire time. It just becomes a distraction, and what we're doing when we get a house ready for sale is we're trying to remove all the distractions. So, if you can put your dog in the crate and they're fine in there, that's great, but if they're gonna bark the whole time, that's definitely a distraction. Now, the entire showing becomes about, trying to ignore it or talking about it, or, I've had some buyers that are such animal lovers that I almost can't get them away from the pet to even look at the house, and that's a problem. Um, Gosh, there was this has happened more than once. I had buyers that let a pet out of where it was contained. So that was a whole thing that I had to call the listing agent about because we couldn't get the pet back to where it had been. And then I've been at showings where one of the buyers was on the floor with the cat the entire time we were there. So these are just things to keep in mind, for people with pets when you've got showings going on. Um, but taking the pets for a ride, some pets like rides, some
Mhm.
pets don't, but you could take them on a ride. Uh, but yeah, I think having a plan in place is really, eh, you know, putting things in one place where they can easily be hidden or they look nice, or keeping all things together. Um, and it is kind of changing your lifestyle a little bit while your home is on the market. But again, the inconvenience of changing your lifestyle a little bit is worth it to get the house under contract.
So it sounds like, making a daily plan, having a routine in your house when your house is on the market, maybe even a pre-planned, if you have pets and you may, like you said, you have a neighbor that could possibly look after your pet for a minute while you're showing the house, or, and even a checklist for the rest of the folks in the house, for the kids and you know,
Mhm.
your partner or whatever.
Yeah, those are all great ideas. Um, and and you have to keep in mind short notice and back-to-back showings, right?
Mhm.
Um, so the idea really is to be as flexible as possible, right? Like you're bending over backwards for these potential buyers. And sometimes, it might be annoying or inconvenient, but sometimes it means, getting out of the house in a rush because, and this could be the buyer or it could be the buyer's agent. There was a mix up this morning, and I actually was setting showings this morning that were happening this morning. Now, as a buyer's agent, I try to set showings the day before. Um, but that doesn't always happen. And so, these people are getting a showing request notice, 1 hour, maybe less than 1 hour before the buyers are about to show up. So you just have to keep that in mind and keep this idea of being flexible open.
Well, you mentioned back-to-back showings and, you know, ideally, when you list a home, that is what you want. You
Yeah.
want every day to be filled with showings. Of course, not every home is gonna get shown every single day, but if you are, for instance, like on a beautiful weekend, it's a Saturday and a Sunday, and you know the weather's gonna be nice, you're probably expecting some showings that day. Is it good advice just to say, "Hey, let's go to a friend's house, there's football on, we can watch football, we can barbecue or whatever," but, is that good advice just to say, "Let's get out of the house the entire Saturday and Sunday?"
Yeah, I love that advice, and it reminds me of the pandemic years when there were back to back to back showings because that thing was gonna go under contract with multiple offers in the first weekend. And we used to tell sellers back then, we actually recommended that if they didn't have, like, a friend's house to stay at, we were like, "Just get a hotel." We we were telling people, like, "Just get out of your house Friday, Saturday, Sunday," and then, it wasn't that big of a deal, or I mean, it is a big deal, but the carrot at the end of the stick was, "Hey, we're gonna have this thing under contract by Sunday night or Monday, and then you're not gonna have to deal with showings again." And now, the market isn't that way anymore. Now, you might be on market 30 or 40 days. You might not have showings every day, and you might not even see them back to back. So in some ways, that's almost more inconvenient because you never know when it's gonna happen, right? And you kinda have to be ready at any time.
Be flexible.
Right. So you wanna stay ready. So, you don't wanna stress yourself out about it too much. Like, it doesn't have to be completely perfect. You're living there. But, keep these things in mind and try to make it, as show ready as possible, as often as possible. Because when buyers are coming, especially if they're coming kind of, if it's a last minute request, that might indicate that the buyer has some urgency, to get into something. So you definitely want to make sure they can see your house and make it a possibility.
So, how important is it to be completely out of the house for the showing? Is it, avoid that awkward buyer interaction? I mean, how important is that?
Super important. It's so important. And this goes for video doorbells as well. Like, or even if you have video or audio recording inside your house, you should be disclosing that. I think it's nice when the listing agent makes a sign by the front door that says, "Hey, there's video, audio, recording happening here." Um, Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, the so I have had sellers who are watching, right? Maybe they're watching through the window and they see the buyers pull up, and maybe that's when they want to leave because the showing is an inconvenience. So they don't want to leave early. They want to leave when the buyer gets there. Just leave. Just leave like 5 or 10 minutes early. Um First of all, we don't want any buyer seller interaction because as a seller, that's what you've hired your listing agent for. And as a buyer, that's why you've hired your buyer's agent. So all communication should be happening through the buyer's agent and the listing agent. A buyer and a seller should never be talking to each other. And the biggest reason is because they're not professionals in the industry. They don't know what they don't know. And so it's possible that they could be hurting our leverage or hurting our negotiation for later in the deal if they're giving away information that they don't even know they shouldn't be giving away, right? So that's the biggest thing. You don't know what you don't know, so just don't risk it. Having a seller who wants to watch, I've had sellers watch on camera. They watch the entire showing from their neighbor's house on their laptop, and it's just creepy. I had a seller who did that, and then he could tell that the buyers were having an issue or trouble, like figuring something out, or something was happening inside the house. And he actually left the neighbor's house and went over there to help the buyers. That's creepy. Those buyers are now creeped out. They do not want your house because you've been sitting there watching them. And even though you came over with good intention to help them figure out how the door opened or whatever it was, like it just becomes really creepy really fast. So you just want to have a wall up between yourself as the seller and the buyer and the buyer's agent. Just stay away from them.
Well, speaking of creepy, what common mistakes do sellers make that hurt showings?
Yeah, so the creepy factor, that's one for sure. Um, yeah, so hovering about during the showings, limiting showings. So, and I touched on this earlier, but like, we have looked at some properties where we went to set a showing and it's a Saturday. I mean, sellers have got to be expecting showings on Saturdays and Sundays because most homeowners, in order to qualify for a mortgage, have a regular job. Most homeowners, so most buyers, are working Monday through Friday during the day. So you have got to expect showings mostly in the evenings and weekends. That's not always true, right? But it is the majority. And in the wintertime, of course, weeknight evening showings become very difficult because of it's being dark outside. So now we're really on these weekend days, Saturdays and Sundays. And we pull up a home that we want to go see on a Saturday and it's not available. They've got it blocked off all day until 4 or 5 p.m. Again, in my mind, I'm like, these sellers must not really want to sell this home. Like, how are they going to block off the entire Saturday for showings? So, anyway, another mistake that they make, we get it all show ready. It looks like a magazine, but now we've got 30, 40 days on market as an average. And so they're letting stuff creep in. And in the beginning, they were really good about keeping everything off the counters and keeping everything cleaned up and vacuuming and making beds. But, we're 20 days in, we're 25 days in. I'm tired of this. And I don't feel like making my bed this morning. Um, I left my toothpaste on the counter. Everybody has teeth. They have to brush their teeth. Like, it's not that big a deal. So you just sort of become lax. You become complacent. You start making excuses for not having it show ready. But again, having it show ready is worth it. You will see that in your price when you sell.
Yeah, that's where those having some extra baskets or a way for you to quickly clean up so that you can exit in a moment's notice if you needed to.
Mhm.
That all comes into play there too.
And most buyers' agents are going to leave feedback for the listing agent when they show. I do this all the time. I try to do it the same day or the next day, go in and provide feedback on every home that we saw. And I don't know that everybody does this. Some people just focus on why the buyers didn't want it, but I always try to do like, here's what the buyers really liked and here are the reasons why the buyers don't want to make an offer. So when your listing agent, as a seller, when your listing agent is giving you that feedback that came from the buyers, and they say these are the reasons why they're not going to make an offer on the house. Um, some of those things you can't change. Like when somebody says they didn't like the layout, we can't change that. We just have to forget about it and move on with our lives. But if they are giving feedback, like smells, right? If they're giving feedback and they're saying, "Oh, there was a very strong pet odor in this house," that's something that you need to take into consideration and not take it personally, because we know that you love your pets. We know that they're part of the family. Um, so you can't get upset about it and take it personally. You have to think of this house now as not only not your house, but it's a product that you're trying to market and sell. And so if you're getting feedback that, the buyers are noticing this smell or there was too much stuff that seemed like it was DIY, not done well. And so now they feel like there's too much work that needs to be done. But you spent the last 10 years of your life DIYing that house. That's hard. That's tough feedback to take. But it's helping you understand what the market value is of your house.
Yeah.
Be-
Try not to take it too personally. Maybe use it as like strategically, like, if you get this feedback, maybe if there's something that you can change at that moment to make your house more marketable.
yeah. My first house had I want to say it was like cedar siding, it kind of looked like a little cabin. It had cedar siding all over it. And when I went to sell it, we had more than one buyer say like they didn't like the exterior, like it just didn't like it. And we actually took the home off the market and bought a paint sprayer and a bunch of paint from Home Depot. And my boss at the time, my parents, like I had this crew come out and we spent the weekend painting all of that cedar siding. Then we got it back on the market and it sold. So that's something that you might consider. If you're getting a lot of the same feedback from buyers on this is why they didn't want to buy the house, you might consider not only making the update or the change, but even this idea of taking it off the market to make the change and then putting it back on. And bonus tip for you, in our market in Denver Metro, if you take the home off the market and you leave it off for 30 days and you do some updates, whatever, then when you put it back on the market on day 31, your days on market starts over. So it looks like it's a brand new listing. Not everyone will be fooled by that because you will have savvy buyers and savvy buyers agents who look at the history and they can see that you had it on and withdrew it and now it's back on. They know that you didn't sell it. But it's a great little marketing trick to use if you need it.
So how long do sellers usually need to live show ready?
Well, I mean, the most important time is the first 7 days, or maybe even 7 to 14 days in this market. We're in a buyer's market. Our days on market are 30 to 40 right now. But what is happening in the first weekend and in the first week or two is the most important time. And that's part of why, like, we don't activate any listings on the MLS unless we have all the pictures ready to go. Because as soon as it's active on the MLS, it is pushing your listing out to all the buyers who it meets their search criteria. And those buyers, the first ones who come through your house, the first ones to set showings, those are the most serious buyers. So this is another reason why it's important to have a good listing agent and to listen to them. Because I'm working with a bunch of sellers right now. We're getting ready to list their homes and we're having some really serious conversations about, what are they doing before it goes to market? Because gone are the days of putting any house on the market and having it sold right away. We're in a buyer's market. Buyers have choices. Buyers have time. So waiting to do things, like if you know that your furnace isn't really working properly, or if you know that, there's these little things that are nicked, or even dirty stuff, right? Like doors and doorknobs get to be real dirty looking sometimes, and you just need to give them a good scrub. But doing all that stuff before it hits the market is so important because if you don't, and then you go through your first week or two and you're not under contract yet, and now you're starting to look at the feedback on why you're not under contract, now you're going to do those things, especially if those things were things that your listing agent mentioned to you before we even made it active. Now you're hurting. Now we're looking at price reductions because all those buyers, those most serious buyers who came in the first week or so, they're gone. They're not coming back. They don't care if you repainted or redid whatever, they're not coming back. So it's back to this idea of first impressions and why they're so important.
Well, that was great, Kiki. Hopefully, this gives sellers some great information, and when they're ready to list their home, they're a little more prepared, and maybe this makes it just a little bit easier for everybody. So,
Oh, I certainly hope so. And if you're thinking about selling your home and you want to minimize the risk and the stress involved, definitely give me a call first. If you like this content and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go.